It started with a phone call that should have meant nothing. It was a Tuesday evening in Austin. The rain had been falling since noon, slow and steady, like a metronome ticking against the roof. I was halfway through a bottle of bourbon, the same brand my late wife used to buy me on my birthdays. The house smelled of dust and wood polish, quiet, old, familiar. My kind of silence. The call came from a number I knew too well. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice sugar-coated and stretched thin. "We need to talk." Megan. My daughter-in-law. The kind of woman who wore smiles like jewelry, expensive, loud, and always for show. My son, David, used to be different before her. Used to work hard, used to laugh. Then came the credit cards, the vacations, the shiny cars that always came with long shadows. "I'm listening," I said, setting down the glass. She sighed dramatically. "It's about David. He made some financial mistakes. I was hoping you could help us clear them up." The rain got louder. "Mistakes?" I repeated. "Debt," she corrected quickly. "But don't worry, it's under control. We just need you to transfer a small amount to hold off the collectors." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from performance. I could hear traffic in the background, maybe the hum of her white Tesla. I imagined her sitting in the driveway, rehearsing this little play before dialing me. She always did love rehearsals. "How much?" I asked. 60,000, she said like she was asking for sugar. "And David knows you're calling me?" Pause. "He's embarrassed." "But yes, of course." That pause told me everything I needed to know. David didn't know. Or maybe he knew too well. Either way, something in me shifted, not anger, not yet, but the slow ache of disappointment that's sharper than rage. "You'll get it by tomorrow," I said flatly. She exhaled with relief, almost too fast. "Thank you, Dad. You're saving us." "No, Megan," I said quietly. "I'm just buying time." After I hung up, I sat there for a while, listening to the clock tick and the bourbon drip from my glass onto the table. In the dim light, I caught the reflection of my wife's photo, her eyes still soft, still forgiving. I wondered what she'd say if she saw how far her son had fallen. When you spend 60 years building a life, you don't expect it to rot from the inside out. But sometimes, it's the roots that turn first. I turned off the light and stood by the window. Megan's car passed by in the rain, tires slicing through puddles, taillights bleeding red into the darkness. I should have felt pity. I didn't. I only felt something old and cold waking up inside me, something I hadn't felt since the war. I didn't know it yet, but that night would end more than one life as it used to be. By morning, the storm had cleared, but the air was still heavy. I hadn't slept. The check lay on the kitchen table, unsigned. My wife's photo still faced me. I'd left it that way, maybe to remind myself what love used to look like before it turned into pity. At exactly 9 o'clock, tires crunched over the gravel outside. A white Tesla. Of course. Megan stepped out, sunglasses even though the sky was gray, heels clicking against wet pavement. She looked like she was walking into a courtroom she already owned. Designer coat, perfume thick enough to hide the scent of guilt. "Morning, Dad," she said brightly, letting herself in before I even answered. "I don't remember inviting you," I said. She smiled. "You never have to. We're family." I poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one across the table. She didn't touch it. "I brought the paperwork," she said, pulling a neat stack of documents from her bag. "All we need is your signature. The bank's expecting the transfer today." "Paperwork?" I picked it up. The print smelled new. Too new. It wasn't a bank release. It was a property lien, on my land, my house, everything I'd built with my hands. I looked at her, and she didn't blink. "It's just collateral," she said quickly. A formality. Once the payment clears, it's void. You'll be helping David keep his business alive. My son doesn't have a business, I said softly. Her jaw tightened. He does now. Or he did, until, she stopped herself, forcing a smile again. Look, I don't want to get into details. You wouldn't understand the financial side. Oh, I understand the financial side, I said. I just don't understand how a man can owe 60 grand without noticing. Her mask cracked. It's not like that. Then how is it? Her eyes darted around the room, the photos, the worn furniture, the old clock. You wouldn't get it, Dad. David's trying. But you know how men like you are. You cling to your savings like it's a badge of honor. Maybe if you'd invested instead of hiding money in this old house, he wouldn't be drowning. The words landed heavier than she knew. My fingers tightened around the paper. This old house, I said slowly, paid for your wedding, your first car, your honeymoon. It fed your child when you two couldn't. So before you talk about drowning, Megan, remember who built the boat. She looked at me coldly. And remember who's still steering it. You're old, Dad. You can't take it with you. Silence. The clock ticked. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded. Then she pushed the papers toward me again. Sign it. You'll get to keep living here. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. Except everything already had. I'll think about it, I said, my voice steady. Her tone sharpened. There's nothing to think about. They'll seize David's accounts by Friday. Do you really want your son to go bankrupt? After everything he's done for you? I raised my eyes slowly. What exactly has he done for me, Megan? She froze. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. The silence stretched, uncomfortable. Then she gathered her bag, mask sliding back on. Fine. I'll tell him you said no. At the door, she turned. You know, your wife wouldn't have hesitated to help her family. Maybe she had more heart than you. The words hit like a blade to the chest, not because of what she said, but because she knew exactly where to cut. When the door closed, I stayed seated for a long time. The clock ticked louder now, every sound like a nail being driven into wood. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out an old envelope, my wife's handwriting on the front. Inside was the deed to the house, the savings book, and a note she'd left before she passed, for David, when he's ready to stand on his own. I smiled bitterly. He'd stood, all right, just on my shoulders. That was the moment it changed. The moment I realized this wasn't about debt or mistakes. It was about control. About seeing how far they could push before I broke. And I did break, just not the way they expected. When Megan's car disappeared down the road, I stood, poured my untouched coffee into the sink, and stared at my reflection in the window. The man staring back looked tired. But there was something else behind the eyes, something sharp and awake. That man, I whispered, is done being used. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain: by the time they realized what they'd done, I wouldn't be around to answer their calls. After she left, the silence in the house felt heavier than the air before a storm. The kind of silence that presses on your chest until you hear your own heartbeat echoing. I poured another drink, but this time it wasn't for comfort. It was to think. I sat at the table, the paperwork still in front of me, the ink of her fake signature gleaming under the kitchen light. $60,000. A property lien. And a woman with the nerve to talk about heart. I laughed softly, a short, tired sound that bounced off the walls. You really picked the wrong man to bury, Megan, I muttered. I pulled out my old leather notebook, the one I hadn't opened since my wife passed. Inside were phone numbers that hadn't seen daylight in years. A lawyer. An insurance agent. An old friend from the sheriff's office. I started making calls. Call number 1, the lawyer. James. It's Robert. A pause. Well, I'll be damned. I thought you'd moved to Florida. Not yet, I said dryly. I need a favor. Quiet one. James exhaled. That's usually code for trouble. Just paperwork. A will update. Maybe a trust transfer. Hypothetical for now. He hesitated. You sound off. Everything okay? Never better, I lied. Meet me tomorrow at 9. Bring the files I left in your safe. He didn't argue. We'd been through too much together for that. After I hung up, I wrote one word on a clean page, disappear. Call number 2, the insurance agent. It took 3 rings. This is Mark. Robert Turner, I said. I'm reviewing my life insurance. Ah, Mr. Turner. Yes, I remember. You've got a policy worth, I know what it's worth, I interrupted. I just want to confirm who the beneficiary is. Your son, David. I smiled faintly. Right. And if something were to change in my circumstances? He chuckled nervously. You mean if you die? Exactly. Well, then the payout goes directly to your listed next of kin unless otherwise amended by a notarized request. Good to know, I said, and hung up. The bourbon was gone. The clock said 1:47 a.m. The rain had started again. I stood, walked to the family photo on the mantel, my wife, my son, and me. Her smile was the kind that made strangers feel safe. David's hand was on my shoulder, back when we still spoke without filters or fake tones. I turned the frame face down. The sound it made against the wood was final. That man in the picture, the man who forgave, who helped, who believed family could fix itself, he died tonight. By sunrise, I had a plan forming in the fog of my mind. Not a full plan, but the skeleton of something that felt alive. I'd vanish, just long enough to make them panic. Just long enough to make them expose what they'd been hiding. And when they thought I was gone for good, I'd let the truth come knocking. The next morning. James showed up right on time, coffee in one hand, curiosity in the other. He looked older than I remembered, same as me. You planning to retire early, or just burn the world down? He asked as he Saturday, little of both, I said, sliding the forged papers toward him. Tell me what you see. He read for a full minute, jaw tightening. These are fake. Amateur work, but good enough to trick a banker who doesn't care. I figured. He looked up. Who did this? My daughter-in-law. Maybe my son too. James leaned back. You pressing charges? No. He frowned. Then what the hell are you doing? Teaching, I said simply. He waited. I didn't elaborate. Instead, I handed him a sealed envelope. My new will, I said. You'll find instructions. File them quietly. No family notifications. He didn't open it. Just nodded. How quiet. Graveyard quiet. That got a smirk out of him. You're really doing this, huh? Already started, I said. When he left, I spent the rest of the day erasing myself in plain sight. I canceled deliveries, set the mail to hold, withdrew half my savings in cash. Then I wrote a letter, just one, to David. It wasn't angry. It was regretful, tired. A father's voice fading away. David, I can't keep saving you. I've realized my presence only feeds your dependence. I'm leaving to find peace. Don't look for me. The house and everything in it are yours now. Take care of Megan. And don't make my mistakes. Dad. The kind of letter that could break a heart, or hide a body. I left it on the kitchen table, right next to my empty bourbon glass. Then I packed a small bag, cash, clothes, keys to my old pickup. Drove 3 hours south toward the coast, where the Gulf air smelled like salt and endings. At a rest stop, I tossed my phone into a dumpster and my wallet into a storm drain. From that moment, Robert Turner, father, veteran, property owner, ceased to exist. But there's a strange kind of peace in vanishing. When no one expects you to be alive, you can finally see who shows up at your funeral, and who goes through your things before the dirt settles. That night, I sat in a cheap motel room under a flickering sign and watched the local news on mute. No mention yet. It would take them a day or two to notice I was gone. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan. "They'll come for the money first," I whispered. "And when they do, they'll open the wrong door." The plan wasn't perfect yet, but I had time. Time, and silence, were finally on my side. The motel's clock ticked like a heartbeat. I hadn't slept in 2 days, but my mind was clear, painfully clear, like a sharpened blade. On the third morning, I saw my face on the news. Local man missing, Robert Turner, 59, of Austin, was last seen 2 days ago leaving his residence. Police are treating the case as a wellness check. Family has reported concerns. Family. That word used to mean something. Now it just meant Megan on television with her crocodile tears and perfect makeup. She stood outside my house, clutching a photo of me like a prop. "Robert's been under stress," she said to the reporter, voice trembling. "We just want him home safe. My husband's devastated." Behind her, David looked like a ghost, pale, disoriented, trying to play along. The moment the camera turned away, he glanced down, jaw tight, refusing to meet her eyes. I knew that look. He wasn't grieving. He was terrified. That night, I called James from a payphone outside a diner. The kind of place where no one remembers your face if you tip in cash. "It's starting," I said. "I saw," he replied. "They're already talking to your bank. She brought documents claiming you transferred property to her name." I smiled faintly. "Good. Let them. You want me to stall?" "No. I want you to cooperate. Every signature she hands you, approve it, but record it. And make sure she thinks she's winning." He was quiet for a beat. "You sure about this, Robert? You're playing a long game here. I've got nothing but time now." When I hung up, the waitress brought my check. She was maybe 20, tired eyes but kind smile. "You all right, sir?" "Just fine," I said. "Just watching the weather change." She nodded, not understanding, and left me to my thoughts. Day 5. They held a vigil. Candles, speeches, Megan in black. She cried through half of it, perfect, practiced sobs. But I saw through her. James sent me photos. My son didn't cry. Not once. He kept looking at his phone like he was waiting for someone to text him the ending of a movie he'd already ruined. By the next morning, Megan was at the lawyer's office with a folder labeled Estate Transition. Inside, a new will she'd typed herself, complete with a forged signature and a notary stamp she probably bought online. James followed my instructions. He nodded, kept his expression blank, and told her it would take a few days to verify. He also handed her a sealed envelope, one that looked official. She smiled when she saw it. Greed always smiles before it bites. Inside that envelope wasn't a check. It was a letter I'd written weeks ago, before any of this began. To whom it may concern, this document authorizes immediate review of all financial records and joint accounts associated with my name, effective upon my confirmed absence. Any irregularities are to be reported to law enforcement directly. R.T. By signing it in front of a witness, Megan had unknowingly triggered a full audit. The trap had teeth now. Day 7. I moved to a small fishing town 2 hours down the coast, quiet, forgotten, the kind of place where no one asked questions. My motel room faced the bay, where old men threw nets into the gray water and radio static filled the air. I bought a cheap burner phone and a newspaper. That's where I saw it, the first headline that made me smile in days. Turner Construction under review for fraud allegations. David's name was listed as a co-owner. So that was it, the business. A shell company using my retirement fund as collateral, funneled through fake invoices and vendor accounts. Megan had been the accountant on paper. They hadn't just tried to use me. They'd already been using me, for years. That evening, I called James again. They bit? I asked. They're panicking, he said. The bank froze 2 of their accounts. Megan called me screaming. She thinks someone's sabotaging her. She's right, I said. You want me to tip the cops yet? Not yet. Let them squirm a little longer. He sighed. You sure you're not enjoying this? I leaned back, watching lightning flash over the bay. I'm not enjoying it. I'm remembering it. Remembering what? What betrayal sounds like. Day 10. The sheriff's office issued a notice. They'd found my truck abandoned near a cliffside road, doors unlocked, wallet on the seat. The implication was clear. Authorities suspect possible self-harm, the article read. I stared at the photo, my old pickup sitting lonely by the edge, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Robert Turner was officially dead. Now the real work could begin. I spent the next week preparing the evidence. James sent copies of every forged document Megan had submitted. My friend from the sheriff's office, Harris, agreed to quietly collect the bank reports once they became public. I built a full timeline of every transaction, every lie. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. About truth. Day 13. Harris called from a private line. You owe me a drink for this, he said. I ran the audit. Your daughter-in-law's been laundering money through 3 accounts, one under her maiden name. I exhaled. How much? Almost 200 grand. My silence stretched. She was never after your son's debt, Robert, Harris said. She is the debt. He emailed the proof. Seeing the numbers in black and white was like swallowing ice. Megan had been siphoning my retirement funds, using David as her cover. She'd even mortgaged a fake business under my name. My son, the boy I'd raised to build, not steal, had either known or chosen not to. I didn't know which was worse. That night, I sat on the motel bed, the papers spread out like a crime scene. My wife's handwriting echoed in my mind, for David, when he's ready to stand on his own. Maybe he'd fallen long before I realized. Maybe she'd known he would. Either way, it was time to stop saving them. Time to show them what it felt like to lose everything they took for granted. Day 15. Megan called James again, panicking. The audit had reached her personal accounts. Reporters were asking questions. David was drinking heavily, calling everyone he knew. James recorded the call, per my request. I swear, I don't know where that money went, she said. He must have moved it before he disappeared. Who? James asked calmly. Robert. He must have planned this. He knew. Her voice cracked, raw, desperate. He's not dead. I know he's not. He's out there watching. James played that part for me later. I remember smiling, slow and tired. She was right. Day 16. Harris texted me 2 words, they're folding. By then, Megan's accounts were frozen. Her lawyer withdrew. The media started circling, hungry for scandal. David went silent. No statements, no defense. I told Harris to leak one last file, an email chain showing Megan's fake invoices and her signature approving every transaction. It spread fast. By the next morning, her face was on every local news channel. The headlines flipped from "Wife of Missing Man Speaks Out" to "Family Fraud Under Investigation." The world was finally seeing what I'd seen all along. I could have stopped there. Let justice take over. But revenge doesn't sleep that easily. I wanted them to face me. Not the ghost they created, the man they buried in greed. So I began the last step of my plan. The final reveal. It was simple, poetic, and cruel only in the way truth always is. James would invite them both to his office for closure, to read the will that had just been recovered. Inside that office, they'd find something waiting for them. Not money. Not forgiveness. Me. James's office sat on the corner of Congress and Fifth, an old brick building with a brass plaque that had outlasted most of its tenants. Inside, everything smelled of paper and polish, the air-conditioned chill wrapping around polished mahogany and the ticking of a wall clock that seemed louder than usual. He'd chosen the setting perfectly. The date, Friday, 3 weeks since my death. The invitation, final reading of Robert Turner's estate. The attendees, my son David, and his wife, Megan. I arrived first. Through the side entrance. No one saw me. James waited by the door, holding a folder against his chest like a shield. His eyes flicked up, studying me for a long moment. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "Been ready since the day she told me my wife had more heart than I did," I said. He nodded grimly. "They think it's about inheritance." "It is," I said. "Just not the kind that pays in dollars." We heard them before we saw them. Megan's heels, sharp, fast, impatient. David's slower steps behind her. They entered together, dressed like mourners playing at civility. She froze when she saw me. The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost beautiful, like watching paint wash off in the rain. David's lips parted. "Dad." I didn't move. "Alive," I said simply. Surprised? Megan's hand went to her mouth. You were, the police, found my truck," I finished for her. That was the point. No one spoke. The silence was so thick it felt like gravity itself. James broke it with his calm, professional tone. "Shall we begin?" We all sat. I stayed standing behind my chair, hands resting on the backrest like I was holding onto something invisible. James opened the file. Robert Turner's last will and testament, he began, prepared 3 weeks prior to his disappearance. In attendance, the named beneficiaries, David Turner and Megan Turner. Megan tried to recover, straightening her posture. "Then I suppose we should get to the point," she said, voice trembling. "We're still listed as heirs." I met her eyes. "You're listed," I said. "But not as heirs." James looked down, pretending to read, though every word was memorized. Clause 1, in the event of Robert Turner's presumed death, all assets are to be held in trust pending a full audit of any financial entities bearing his name. He turned the page. Clause 2, any individual found complicit in financial misconduct shall forfeit all inheritance rights. Megan's throat worked as she swallowed. What is this? Some kind of trick?" I smiled faintly. "No tricks. Just truth." James handed her a folder. Inside were copies of the forged documents, the audit report, and Harris's statement tying her to the fake invoices. She didn't open it. She just stared at her name printed on every page. David finally spoke. "Megan, what is this?" She turned on him, eyes flashing. "Don't look at me like that. You think I did this alone? You were part of it." "Part of what?" he shouted. "You said it was for the business." "It was, until your father caught on. You told me he gave the money." The argument spiraled fast, raw and panicked. I let it play. I'd imagined this moment 100 times, the sound of denial cracking into confession. When the noise died down, I spoke quietly. You too could have come to me. Told me the truth. But instead, you forged my name, sold my wife's jewelry, and used my savings to build a castle of lies. You didn't just steal money. You stole decency. David's voice broke. Dad, I didn't want to know, I cut him off. There's a difference. He looked down. Megan stayed silent. James cleared his throat. Robert has a final stipulation, he said, sliding one more document across the table. The trust contains one remaining account, $200,000, reserved for the rightful heir once the audit concludes. Megan's eyes lit up for a second. That's ours, she whispered. No, I said. That's what you owe. James opened another folder, this one marked law enforcement release. Inside were the signatures from the bank, the police, and the audit firm. The case was already public. Every penny she moved had been traced. Every account frozen. Megan's face collapsed in slow motion. You did this on purpose. I did, I said. But not to ruin you. To show you what ruin looks like when it's honest. She stood abruptly, chair screeching back. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You abandoned your family. I didn't abandon anything, I said calmly. I just stopped financing the people who already buried me. David pressed his palms to his eyes. What happens now? That depends on you, I said. The police have what they need. But I told them I'd handle the family side privately. You come clean, cooperate, maybe you walk away with your conscience still breathing. He looked up, tears streaking through the mask of shock. And if I don't? Then you'll find out what it feels like to really lose a father. He nodded slowly, trembling. I'll talk to them. Megan laughed bitterly. You always were weak. And you, I said, turning to her, always mistook manipulation for strength. She spun toward the door, but James stepped in front of it. We're not done, he said evenly. I walked around the table and stopped a few feet from her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her perfume, the same expensive scent she'd worn the day she forged my name, filled the space between us. I don't hate you, Megan, I said. I pity you. Because someday, when you look back, you'll realize you had everything, and you threw it away for paper and pretense. Her lip trembled. You think you're better than me? No, I said quietly. Just cleaner. The meeting ended in silence. Megan left first, slamming the door so hard the blinds rattled. David lingered. He didn't speak right away. Then, Mom would have stopped all this, he said. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe she saw it coming. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. You really faked your death? Yes. Why? I took a deep breath. Because you can't teach the living what loss means until you make them feel it. He stared, broken and small, then left without another word. When the door closed, the room finally exhaled. James looked at me. You could have ruined them completely. Pressed charges. Taken everything. I shook my head. I already took what mattered most. What's that? Their peace. That night, I walked down by the river. The city lights shimmered over the water, reflected in long broken lines, like the past, distorted but still there. I thought about my wife. About her handwriting on that old envelope, for David, when he's ready to stand on his own. Maybe, finally, he would. Or maybe he wouldn't. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd spent half my life saving people who didn't want saving. The other half learning what it costs to keep doing it. Revenge didn't bring me joy. It brought silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. And silence, I realized, was enough. The river looked different at dawn. It always did after rain, the surface smooth, the color somewhere between silver and smoke. The city behind me was waking up, but I didn't look back. 3 weeks since I'd come back from the dead, and I still caught myself flinching at my own reflection in windows. Maybe because part of me hadn't come back at all. I rented a small cabin 2 hours south, near Corpus Christi. It sat on the edge of a slow river that fed into the Gulf. The land was cheap, the silence cheaper. I fixed the porch myself, new boards, new nails, same old ache in my hands. It felt good to build something that didn't involve betrayal. There wasn't much inside, a bed, a desk, a coffee pot that hissed like an old friend. I'd brought one suitcase, one photo, and one rule: no phone, no visitors, no news. At least, that was the plan. On the 5th morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in David's shaky handwriting. I left it on the table for a whole day before I opened it. Dad, you were right. About everything. The company's gone. Megan's gone too, moved out last week. The police called me in twice. I told them the truth. I don't know if that helps, but I needed you to know I didn't fight them. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're still out there somewhere. I'm trying to get clean, trying to work again. The house feels empty. Mom's photo is still on the shelf. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. David. I read it twice, then a third time, slower. For a moment, I felt something move, a soft pulse in the chest, the old instinct that used to mean forgive him. But forgiveness is like a limb you lose in war, sometimes you still feel it, but it's not there anymore. I folded the letter neatly, put it in the drawer, and closed it. The days passed quietly. I woke with the sunrise, brewed coffee on the porch, watched fishermen move across the water like ghosts with nets. I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't need to. Sometimes I'd think about calling James, or Harris, or even David. Then I'd remind myself, some stories aren't meant to have sequels. The news still found its way to me, though, through whispers at the diner, headlines on the paper left behind by other hands. Turner scandal ends in plea deal. Megan Turner sentenced to 18 months for financial fraud. No mention of David. No photo. Just a line buried in the second paragraph. The primary witness cooperated fully with investigators. That was enough. The nights were the hardest. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was too full. Every sound in the dark carried weight, the creak of wood, the sigh of wind through the trees, the faint hum of the refrigerator. I'd pour a glass of bourbon, sit on the porch, and listen. Sometimes I'd imagine her voice, my wife's, carried by the breeze. She used to say silence was sacred. That it meant the world was giving you space to heal. But I'd learned something different. Silence isn't always healing. Sometimes it's punishment that doesn't end. One evening, I drove to the coast. The sun was sinking low, setting the water on fire. I parked near the pier and walked barefoot along the sand until I reached the edge of the surf. The ocean never cared about human plans. It erased footprints faster than sins. I watched the tide swallow the horizon and thought about all the things we bury, money, pride, guilt, and how they always find their way back up eventually. Maybe that's what truth really is, the tide that refuses to stay gone. A couple walked past me, young, laughing, holding hands. The girl had long hair and freckles like my wife used to. The boy wore a cheap jacket, wind tugging at the collar. They looked so certain of everything. I wanted to tell them to hold on to that. That life has a way of trading certainty for silence before you even notice. But I didn't say anything. Just nodded, let them pass, and kept walking until they were out of sight. At night, I dreamed of my house, the one I'd built with my hands. In the dream, the lights were on, the windows warm, my wife humming in the kitchen. When I woke, the sound still echoed faintly, like a ghost that didn't know it was gone. I didn't cry. I hadn't in years. But I felt something close to it, that sharp pressure in the throat, the ache that tells you you're still human, even after everything. Sometimes I wondered if revenge had changed anything. If justice and peace were ever the same thing, or if I just traded one kind of loneliness for another. The answer came slowly, one morning, as I sat on the porch watching the river move past. Revenge doesn't fix what's broken. It just lets you stop pretending it can be fixed. That realization hurt less than I expected. Maybe because it was finally honest. One afternoon, I opened my drawer again and took out David's letter. I read it one last time, then folded it carefully and placed it under my wife's photo, the only thing I'd brought from the old house. Her smile hadn't changed. Still soft, still kind. The kind of kindness that belonged to another life entirely. I did what I had to, I said out loud. You'd hate it. But you'd understand. The photo didn't answer, but the light through the window shifted just enough to catch her eyes, that glint of warmth, real or imagined. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. As the days grew longer, the ache grew quieter. The world didn't need to forgive me, and I didn't need to forgive it. That was the balance. Every morning I made the same ritual: boil water, pour coffee, sit on the porch, and watch the river slide by like time itself, steady, relentless, cleansing everything in its path. Sometimes I'd think of the people I'd lost, the lies I'd exposed, the silence I'd earned. And sometimes I'd just listen to the birds, to the wind, to the small noises that make up a life when all the loud things are gone. The locals thought I was a retired fisherman, or a writer, or just another man hiding from his past. They weren't wrong. When they asked my name, I told them Robert. Never the last name. Never the story. Everyone deserves a little mystery, even in the end. On the last page of my notebook, the one I'd carried since that night in Austin, I wrote a single line before closing it for good. Revenge doesn't heal you. But it makes the silence bearable. I closed the cover, leaned back in the chair, and watched the sun sink into the river. The water shimmered gold for a moment before fading to gray, and I thought, maybe that's what life really is. A brief brightness, then calm. A flash of truth before the dark. And if you're lucky, just enough peace to watch it happen. If this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can continue the journey by clicking the box on the left. Thank you for being here.